Hello VN fans, how you doing? It's Jordan here. Now today we've got a review of a very exciting otome, Birushana. It's been long anticipated. Now this review was written by the lovely Lilia Helal. Please go follow her on Twitter with the links in the description. These are her words, not mine. Let's see what she thinks. Birushana Rising Flower of Genpei is the latest major otome release for consoles, coming to the Nintendo Switch exclusively and releasing today for the United States and the 1st of July in Europe. As the first otome release from Idea Factory International for 2022, the hype for Birushana to live up to such lofty expectations was more than understandable. The game also has the backing of being a historical fantasy otome whose team shares many of the same members as Nightshade, a 2016 life and death drama based on ninjas soon after the Sengoku period. With such promising potential, with all things considered, did it deliver? Before we get into the review, this game is available digitally and physically, and if you want to purchase it, then consider using the links in the description and pinned comment. If you purchase from there, you can help VN Paradise. And of course, subscribe, it will be the best thing you do today. The players are put into the role of Shanao, a Yoshitsune in the Heian period of the Genpei War. As the only heir to the Genji clan, she must keep her true gender a secret while attempting to bring peace between two clans, raring to cut one another down into nothing. Through its numerous swords clashing, war conflicts arising, and Shanao being an absolute badass as a capable and terrifying war machine in her own right, Birushana is all about Shanao and its world finding peace, with Shanao discovering her origins while fighting for both the future of Japan and her own destiny. Birushana certainly proves to be one for history buffs for its setting, Easter eggs and inspiration, but it takes many creative liberties for the sake of being original and for its fantastical edge. This does, however, make up for the majority of its entertainment for how out of left field certain revelations are, while still being educational to a certain extent. While its common route wastes no time in getting to the action with snappy and quick-paced plot, the same cannot be said for some of its routes, with the midpoint of its recommended route order feeling sluggish and uneventful compared to the first and last routes. For this reason, Birushana is an otome best played in multiple sittings, and with frequent breaks to space out its chapters as much as possible, due to story beats being frequently repeated during each and every playthrough. This is mostly to the detriment of progressing character development in a fashion dissimilar to how they are shown and explored as soon as you have experienced one route. An example of this is how Shanao develops, which starts to feel tiresome when seeing how it pans out in the same way no matter which love interest she is with. On the other hand, Shanao's reason for fighting can be different with each route, which results in capturing how she is going about discovering what she truly wants for her future and how she wants to form her own identity along the way, as the best form of giving her her very own agency and satisfying character journey and closure. Before we go any further in detail about its characters, as our final point for this section, the game took around 45 hours to clear with fast reading. For those reading at a normal pace, it could easily take up to 55 hours, if not longer, especially if you're a slower reader. For the sake of being transparent due to possible player preference, its common route is short, encompassing 3 chapters, while its love interest routes totals a playthrough of 12 chapters each. From start to finish, the game gave me striking similarities to the classic otome Hakuoki, with Birushana coming across as a modernized tale due to its focus on Shanao hiding her identity for the majority of its runtime, but who is more than capable at putting every other character in their place with her own combat skills. It's refreshing to see a heroine as independent and proactive as she is here, while still retaining character flaws that make her personal journey a primary selling point of the game's events, coming from her own perspective as the main character. As one can expect from an otome, its love interests are varied enough in temperaments, backstories and design, for at least one of them to appeal to each and every player. Better yet, Birushana does a wonderful job in making the dynamics with each match up as special as one another. The relationship between Shanao and each love interest feels just as significant and substantial in how they bond and relate to one another for unique reasons to make each one as valid as the other, while still having a different dynamic. Considering its recommended route order of Noritsune, Shungen, Benkei, Yorimoto, Tomomori, the game starts and ends with its most enjoyable route, since these two have the most satisfying balance of plot and romance. In fact, Tomomori's route is the most entertaining and addictive otome route I have experienced since Alan's in Cupid Parasite. Tomomori's route hits all the right notes in its exciting relationship progression between Shinao and Tomomori. Highly important story reveals and fast-paced plot progression make for the best send-off for the title when you get to his route as its finale. His route and character will give off plenty more Hakuoki vibes as a Chikage sort of love interest, appearing antagonistic towards Shinao across all the routes before experience what his deal is. Additionally, dynamics such as these relationships are highly entertaining and refreshing, especially in Noritsune's, which not only impressed me for his character development being the best from the love interest, but for its uncommon depiction of a rivals-turned-lovers relationship in the genre. As far as its love interests are concerned, they have splendid characterization and writing, with each one being fleshed out to explain their own motivations and why they act the way they do, being especially notable for making them more nuanced, relatable, and well-rounded. The likability of its entire cast can easily be extended to every other side character as well, who will understandably be cast favorites to its player base, even beating out its love interest and Shinao, which is once again an unusual takeaway for an otome. There is a very appealing and solid reverse harem setup and dynamic in the majority of its routes, making for an extremely entertaining grouping of certain reoccurring characters that builds on its humor, memorability, and characterization. Such an element often goes unfeatured in other otomes, but instead feels similar to that of love interest relationships from groups in Code Realize and Buster Fellows, only better by involving side characters for even more screen time. Birushana also features brilliantly dynamic sprite work that constantly sells its story, emphasizing warfare and sword action. Flashy panels and effects are exclusive to these moments, although these tend to be quite laggy but do remain pleasing and impressive to the eye despite some delays. While the game has an expected affection meter and love catch to indicate which route players will find themselves on by color matching the flower icons to its love interests, it is not the only meter players have to keep an eye on. Shinao has her own 3 personal meters to keep balance to progress the story: strength, kindness, and wisdom. This feature does however end up being redundant once in a route, which is a shame since it added more agency to the atypical formula of a simple affection meter, which could have been well worth implementing more often for another layer of player interactivity and input. This can also be quite tedious in going in and out of the main menu to view these meters, which will be often to keep on top of your progress during its common route especially. With the game being all about warfare, considering its time period and with the knowledge of it being from the team behind Nightshade, Birushana is an especially bittersweet otome. The game has a happy love end, a tragic love end, and multiple bad endings for each love interest route, and each one has its fair share of angst plus fluff to sell its romance and emotional highs, making for an appealing and well-rounded experience. In all accounts, Birushana does well in hitting each note it should do as an otome whilst giving just a bit more to make it truly stand out from the crowd, such as the previously mentioned personal meters to Shinao's character and flashy effects that visualize many of its battles. What should be noted for potential buyers, however, is much like how some players were uncomfortable with Nightshade's love interest pool consisting of a cousin, Birushana does contain a pairing that is a little bit incestuous. With one look of the title, it is a very polished otome, especially with its mouth movements, but its very best aspect is with its unusual what-if scenarios as bonus content for its love interest's good endings being cleared. These short scenarios have Shinao pair up with a side character, usually suggestively romantic, to truly cure each and everyone's side character syndrome, a common element to any and all otome for players feeling hard-pressed in crushing on a side character over the main love interests. These little bonus chapters felt like their own contained mini routes and were a massive incentive in clearing the game in its entirety for how unique and interesting this tiny bit of character exploration is, for how it really sells how enjoyable and well written its supporting cast are. For its mechanics, Birushana lets you skip to the next choice selection for ease of replaying its routes more than once to unlock all of its endings. I personally found that its UI was nothing to write home about, though it does do a good job stylistically in capturing and expressing its overall aesthetic in a muted and floral design, and its flowchart is quite unorthodox considering how its chapters and love interest routes are all in one diagram. While easy to navigate, it further solidifies just how repetitive the story is by how it all connects in quite the linear narrative as depicted in such a layout. On a final note, its translation is top-notch with very few errors in typos. It is especially notable for being so thorough with its dictionary for covering so many words and terminology to make the game as understandable and easy to pick up and consume for a Western audience, who may be unfamiliar with some terms and references that are made quite frequently considering its period and context. Overall, Birushana has a proactive heroine who players will immediately vouch for in seeing develop and get her happy ending alongside an extremely likable and even lovable cast that reaches the most minor of supporting characters. Then we have another iconic bad boy love interest in Tomomori, who is not just a knockout of a route, who makes the end stretch of the entire experience well worth reaching despite its repetitive story, but is my main reason to encourage those interested in the title to experience the game sooner rather than later. Birushana does stumble during its midpoint, but the end result is still a solid otome experience and one that feels at home on the Nintendo Switch. A 7.5 out of 10. And there we have it. Thanks to Lilia for tackling this otome as usual. Please go follow her on Twitter with the links in the description and check out some of her other reviews that she's done for us, such as Variable Barricade and Even If Tempest. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment about if you're looking forward to this one or not. Are you hyped about it? Do let us know. We'll see you later this week with the review of Eurokill. Definitely an interesting prospect, and we'll see you over there.